It began with breaking news. On a quiet morning, Americans turned on their televisions and phones to see a headline that seemed almost unreal. Charlie Kirk, the voice of Turning Point USA, had been found dead. A man who built his life on outrage, slogans, and endless battles for the soul of America was suddenly gone.
Police sources confirm that Kirk's death is being treated as suspicious. Details remain scarce, but investigators are pursuing multiple leads.
For millions of supporters, it was a tragedy. For his critics, a grim twist of fate. And for those who watched the shifting balance of power in the world, it was something darker. The sudden end of a man whose words had echoed far beyond America's borders. How could one young man, barely in his 30s, shape not only the politics of his country, but also the fragile map of global power? To answer that, we must go back to the beginning.
From student activist to political firebrand, the meteoric rise of Charlie Kirk.
He was born in 1993 in Arlington Heights, Illinois. A child of suburban America, raised in a middle-class household. Nothing about his early years suggested that he would one day stand at the heart of the nation's culture wars. Yet from a young age, Kirk had one gift, the ability to turn outrage into influence. By 18, while most of his peers worried about college applications, Kirk was building a movement.
I was convinced that the conservative voice was being silenced on campuses. I had to do something about it.
That something became Turning Point USA, a student organization that grew like wildfire, promising to fight liberal bias in universities. In just a few years, Kirk turned himself from an unknown teenager into one of the most recognizable conservative figures in America. But even then, in the shadows, the seeds of controversy were being planted.
What Kirk sells to young Americans is not education, but anger, a packaged ideology funded by powerful donors.
And while his fans saw him as a defender of freedom, his critics saw something else. A populist, a manipulator, a man too comfortable with echoing foreign propaganda. Today, as investigators still search for the truth behind his death, we must ask, was Charlie Kirk a patriot who fought for America, or a reckless populist whose words weakened it? To find out, we must follow the trail of his life, from the campuses he electrified, to the White House he entered, to the controversies that may have signed his final sentence. After high school, Charlie Kirk chose not to pursue the traditional path. Instead of a university education, he poured his energy into a cause. Turning Point USA. Founded in 2012, the group began in small auditoriums and cafeterias. Within a year, it was hosting rallies, distributing pamphlets, and producing viral clips targeting liberal indoctrination in American schools.
Finally, someone's standing up for conservative students. Kirk gets it. He's one of us.
But it wasn't just grassroots energy fueling the rise. Behind the scenes, wealthy conservative donors saw potential in Kirk. Millions of dollars began flowing into his project, transforming Turning Point from a campus club into a national force.
Turning Point USA now operates on more than 1,000 campuses nationwide, boasting hundreds of staff and a multi-million-dollar budget.
With money came influence. Kirk was invited to speak at conferences, to share stages with senators and media personalities. Soon, he was no longer just an activist. He was a rising star of the conservative movement. But this rise also made him a magnet for criticism.
Kirk presents himself as a voice of the people, but he's funded by billionaires who see students as pawns in a larger political game.
Still, the momentum was undeniable. Kirk had found his formula. Short, sharp sound bites crafted to provoke outrage and go viral. By the mid-2010s, he wasn't just a guest on conservative radio shows. He was running one of his own. His message was spreading, and his influence was growing.
Charlie, what's your ultimate goal with Turning Point?
We want to win America's culture war, and we're just getting started.
That culture war would soon bring him closer to the center of American politics. The 2016 presidential election was about to change everything. For Kirk, for Turning Point, and for the nation. The 2016 election changed the American political landscape. And for Charlie Kirk, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. As Donald Trump rose from outsider to Republican nominee, Kirk aligned himself tightly with the campaign's rhetoric, anti-establishment, confrontational, unapologetically combative.
Trump is giving conservatives a voice we haven't had in decades. He's willing to fight, and that's exactly what America needs.
Kirk's loyalty did not go unnoticed. Suddenly, he was invited onto major networks, his commentary amplified to millions. Turning Point USA became a recruitment hub for young Trump supporters. At campus events, students chanted slogans, waved red hats, and filmed viral confrontations with political opponents.
Charlie Kirk has positioned himself as a bridge between Trump's campaign and America's college campuses, a role that has earned him unprecedented access to the White House.
By his early 20s, Kirk was walking the halls of power, attending closed-door strategy sessions, and standing on stage beside cabinet members. He was no longer just a voice of student activism. He was now a trusted soldier in Trump's culture war.
Kirk's genius is branding. He markets politics like a lifestyle product, simple, emotional, and consumable in seconds. But behind the slogans is a troubling lack of depth.
Supporters praised him as a young visionary. Critics dismissed him as a populist opportunist. But either way, his profile was skyrocketing. And soon, he would step into even more dangerous territory, where his words would reach not just college campuses, but the entire world. By 2018, Charlie Kirk's platform had grown far beyond college campuses. Podcasts, cable appearances, and social media gave him a reach that rivaled traditional media outlets. With this reach came new responsibilities and new controversies.
America can't waste its energy on conflicts abroad. We need to put our own country first. Let Europe handle its own problems.
On the surface, these statements sounded like standard America first rhetoric. But beneath the simplicity, some analysts noticed a dangerous alignment. By downplaying Western support for Ukraine, Kirk's words echoed certain narratives promoted by Russia. Critics warned that such rhetoric could weaken international coalitions and embolden authoritarian powers.
Kirk's messaging on Ukraine has raised eyebrows among foreign policy experts. While framed as America First, it mirrors talking points originating from Russian state media.
The more he spoke, the more his influence grew, not just in shaping domestic opinion, but in affecting the perception of America abroad. By 2020, observers began to link his rhetoric to the larger narrative of U.S. isolationism, which inadvertently created space for China's rise and Russia's aggressive policies.
Kirk isn't just a student activist anymore. He's a megaphone for ideas that, intentionally or not, undermine U.S. credibility internationally.
Supporters argued he was merely advocating prudence, emphasizing American interests over foreign entanglements. Detractors warned that his simplifications carried real consequences for war-torn nations like Ukraine and for global balance of power. And as the 2020 election approached, every word he spoke was amplified. Every phrase, every tweet, every viral clip became part of a narrative with ripple effects across the globe. By 2020, Charlie Kirk had become a household name among conservatives. His appearances on cable news, podcasts, and social media amplified his voice like never before. And with the presidential election looming, every word mattered.
We will fight for America. We will fight for our future. And we will make sure that our values lead the nation again.
But as his influence grew, so did the scrutiny. Analysts, journalists, and foreign observers began to note the patterns in his messaging. Many pointed out that his consistent framing of foreign conflicts, especially in Ukraine, often mirrored Russian talking points.
Kirk's commentary on Ukraine has repeatedly echoed narratives promoted by Russian state media, raising questions about the impact on U.S. foreign policy.
Supporters argued he was merely emphasizing America first, warning against unnecessary entanglement overseas. Critics argued that his simplified messaging had real consequences, weakening international alliances and giving authoritarian powers more room to maneuver.
Kirk's rhetoric has shifted from campus activism to shaping national perception, and the stakes could not be higher. Every clip, every tweet, every soundbite reverberates beyond our borders.
Meanwhile, Turning Point USA continued to expand its operations, influencing young voters and mobilizing volunteers nationwide. But as his platform grew, so did allegations of spreading disinformation, echoing foreign propaganda, and destabilizing the traditional bipartisan understanding of foreign policy.
Kirk's approach to messaging, blending populist nationalism with selective foreign narratives, has drawn criticism for its potential to mislead Americans on international issues.
By the end of 2020, the question was no longer whether Kirk could influence American students. It was whether his words had begun to shape the perception of the United States itself, at home and in the eyes of the world. And as the post-election tensions rose, the stage was being set for consequences far beyond anything Kirk could have imagined. By mid-2022, the war in Ukraine had escalated, and the consequences of influential voices in the US were becoming tragically clear. Charlie Kirk's repeated messaging against direct aid and framing the conflict as Europe's problem contributed to hesitancy in American support.
Delays in military and humanitarian assistance correlate with increased civilian casualties and infrastructure destruction across eastern Ukraine.
Analysts noted that when influential figures like Kirk minimized the conflict, public pressure on policymakers decreased, slowing critical support. Each day of delayed aid meant lives lost, hospitals overwhelmed, and towns under siege.
It's not just rhetoric in a vacuum. These messages influenced perceptions, which indirectly affected funding and tactical support for Ukraine, with human consequences on the ground.
European allies expressed concern. Diplomatic cables noted that mixed signals from US public figures created friction in coordinated responses. Meanwhile, Russia capitalized on the distraction, gaining strategic advantage.
Every day, without sufficient assistance, civilian casualties rise. Political messaging abroad can have immediate and devastating effects on people's lives.
Domestically, Kirk's base celebrated his advocacy for America first. But analysts warned the cost overseas was tangible and measurable. Hospitals reported shortages, evacuation efforts slowed, and frontline units were under-resourced. The human toll became undeniable, showing the direct link between domestic rhetoric and international consequences. By early September 25, the war in Ukraine had escalated to a level that shocked the world. The consequences of delayed international support and influential rhetoric from figures like Charlie Kirk became painfully clear.
On September 7th, a rocket strike hit a residential building in Kyiv's Sviatoshinsky district. A pregnant woman, her husband, and their 2-year-old son were killed instantly. Their names were Sofia and Nikita Lemakov, and their son Lev.
Sofia was in the final months of pregnancy, and the tragedy claimed the life of her unborn child as well. Analysts noted that when influential voices in the US minimized the conflict, public pressure for aid slowed, and these delays had direct human consequences.
Each day without sufficient support meant hospitals were overwhelmed, evacuations were delayed, and frontline units were under-resourced. Casualties mounted, and civilians, including children, bore the brunt of inaction.
In another incident, on Borshkahivka, a pregnant woman suffered severe burns when her apartment was hit. Doctors performed an emergency C-section, saving her newborn son, named Nazar, while both mother and child remained in critical condition.
International reactions were mixed. Western leaders expressed condolences and condemned the attacks, but the lack of a unified, decisive position from the US allowed Russia to continue its aggressive actions. The rhetoric propagated by influential figures, echoing isolationist or dismissive narratives, contributed indirectly to these tragic outcomes. The human cost of political words became undeniable. As the tragedies in Kyiv reverberated across the world, attention turned to the United States. Domestic debates intensified over foreign aid, defense spending, and the role of public figures in shaping policy. Charlie Kirk's rhetoric, emphasizing America first, was scrutinized like never before.
Statements minimizing the conflict or echoing Russian narratives fueled divisions in Congress and among the public. Funding packages were delayed, diplomatic pressure weakened, and Ukraine's front lines faced harsher conditions as a result.
Families in Kyiv and Kharkiv watched their neighborhoods burn while debates thousands of miles away focused on political positioning. People questioned whether the words of influential figures in the U.S. were, intentionally or not, exacerbating their suffering.
Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk continued to rise in prominence domestically, rallying a segment of voters with his populist messages. Supporters praised his focus on internal priorities and conservative values. Critics argued that his approach undermined America's credibility on the world stage. The duality of influence, domestic acclaim versus international consequence, became a defining tension.
One key effect was geopolitical. China, observing the fragmented Western response, advanced its economic and strategic interests, further shifting global power dynamics. Analysts noted that the vacuum created by weakened U.S. foreign engagement allowed rival powers to consolidate influence.
This chapter of the story illustrates the interconnectedness of rhetoric, policy, and human lives. Every public statement had the potential to ripple across continents, affecting real people, innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. And as the world watched, the consequences of words became undeniably tangible. By late September 25, tensions had reached a breaking point. The cumulative effect of divisive rhetoric, delayed support for Ukraine, and escalating internal political battles in the U.S. created a volatile environment. Charlie Kirk's rhetoric, emphasizing America first, was scrutinized like never before.
Investigations questioned whether his statements indirectly contributed to civilian casualties abroad and whether his influence on policy weakened the USS's international stance.
Families in Kyiv continued to mourn. Every new missile strike reminded the world that words, politics, and policy were not abstract. They cost lives. Pregnant women, children, ordinary citizens suffered while leaders debated responsibility.
Behind closed doors, U.S. policymakers grappled with a dilemma. Should they distance themselves from Kirk and his messaging, or maintain political alliances despite growing evidence of harm abroad? Meanwhile, analysts warned that China's rise was accelerated by Western indecision, further complicating global dynamics.
The world noticed the fractures. Russia and China exploited them, consolidating influence while the US struggled with internal divisions. Every delay, every equivocal statement had cascading consequences.
And then, in a shocking twist that no one anticipated, Charlie Kirk's life ended abruptly under mysterious circumstances. Speculation swirled. Was it politically motivated, personal vendetta, or the culmination of years of mounting controversy? The question haunted both his supporters and critics, setting the stage for the final chapter. The final chapter arrives with a revelation that had been building throughout the story. Charlie Kirk's death was sudden, violent, and shrouded in mystery. Investigators reported signs pointing to political motives, though personal vendettas could not be ruled out.
Evidence suggests that Kirk's influential rhetoric, his ties with controversial figures, and the political tension he stoked contributed to an environment where violence became possible. Sources hint at threats he had received in the weeks prior, reflecting both domestic outrage and international scrutiny.
For Ukraine, the consequences were already tragic. Delayed aid, divided international support, and amplified Russian aggression continued to claim civilian lives. Pregnant women, children, and families in Kyiv and Kharkiv bore the cost of political rhetoric thousands of miles away.
In the United States, Kirk's death sparked fierce debate. Supporters mourned the loss of a conservative icon, emphasizing his domestic achievements and advocacy. Critics argued that his words had real-world consequences, weakening the US's credibility abroad and indirectly endangering lives in Ukraine.
The dual legacy is undeniable. Domestically, Kirk inspired a movement. Internationally, his rhetoric had ramifications far beyond American borders. Geopolitical rivals, particularly Russia and China, advanced their interests amid Western indecision and domestic division.
Ultimately, the story of Charlie Kirk illustrates the power. Words, amplified by media and political platforms, have consequences. Lives were lost, alliances were strained, and global dynamics shifted. The human cost, the geopolitical fallout, and the unanswered questions about his death leave a legacy that is complex, polarizing, and profoundly instructive.